Shavua Tov, good morning. We're going to start. Thank you for coming, everybody. This the rest of the month of Tevet is sponsored by the Aaron Leilui Nishmat Levi Ben Yosef and by the Silvers and Leilui Nishmat Bas Yefege Bas Yisrael. And this week is sponsored by the Deutsch family, Miriam's Abba's 12th Yortzeit, Leilui Nishmat Menachem Ben Shmuel Eliezer. It's the right name? I said the name right? Yeah. I copied it from somewhere. Okay. For all the sponsorship, for all the learning. It means a lot, and it goes a long way. Long way. So shikoach, everybody. Last week, we had a whole shiur dedicated to the question of, can a parent's love for a child ever be complete? Do you remember that? We were talking about this last week. Can it be complete? And we discussed how, in its nature, it's impossible for things like that to be complete the way that everyone needs it to be. And that's embedded in the teva of the Bria. That's embedded, thank you so much. That's embedded in the nature of creation. That's how it was planned from above. And there's a lot more to elaborate on that. And it was a very strong, everyone's feedback was extremely, extremely helpful. And I want to thank you all for that. It was very, very chazak. And today, we're asking another question. Now, these questions that we're asking, the answer is always obviously no, even though we don't want that to be the answer. And that is the question, does a child always feel their parents' love? Is a child walking around constantly with that they do know to be true, but do they always feel it? Now, can you imagine accepting that answer being no? What would we do with ourselves? Because our hopes and dreams and greatest aspiration is that a child lives and grows up in a home and then has to go out into the world, but even before they go out into the world, that they walk around with this shield of love, of clear love, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves them, and that they know their parents love them all the time. I could flip this question for a second and say, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, do your children know that you love them all the time? Always? Don't say yes to sound smart or holy, because that's what you think I want to hear or anyone else needs to hear. You'll probably have a chair chucked at you if you say yes. You feel that all the time. I walk around feeling that Hashem loves me all the time, even though you know it to be a truth. There are moments. This is part of this world, this is part of this dance that we're in, but it's the same thing also with parents and with children, and that's where it gets a shtickle more sensitive and difficult to make sense of and to really know what to do with that. He's going to unpack it today, Rabbi Schwartz is going to unpack it today in a manner that'll enable us and strengthen us to keep on doing the best job, to keep on going strong. I believe it'll take a little bit of time, but to keep on with the notion of that, obviously the answer is no. So what does that mean in Lamaisa? What do we do with that being a reality? And while we're learning a piece like this, if we're not davening, then this Torah is mamish like a waste. Because this is a piece that you have to daven through. All the pieces, hopefully we're learning. Hopefully anyone's learning. Whenever they're learning, they're davening. But a piece like this, who wouldn't want to daven over the fact that they want so badly that their children should walk around more and more knowing their parents love them. Their parents love them despite report cards, despite letters from teachers, despite when parents of other kids come and say, your kid did that and that to me. So I'm reminded of a classic Chassidic teaching that explains the following. There are times, and this is very important, for us to frame this with HaKadosh Baruch Hu and His children to be the greatest framework for our working with us and our kinderlach. There are times in life, let's say a parent comes to another parent and says, your kid, the way I heard them speak, their lashon, their foul language, is so disgusting, and it really endangers and threatens the purity of my child. So there's two types of responses. There's two types of parents. One parent would say, oh my God, thank you so much for telling me. I'm going to rip into him and make sure that never happens again. Sounds like a responsible adult, no? Taking responsibility and then going weiter with their own chinuch. And not, the truth is there's three types of people. The first ones socks that guy in the face that comes and says something to you about your child. Sorry, that's Aleph. Beis is the one that answered the way they just answered. But Gimel is the father that says, I'm so sorry that you had to go through this, and I'm already asking you for mechila, and it's my fault. It's my fault because I didn't really give over to my children yet great enough how to be, how to walk, how to talk, and things you say and things you don't say. The father, the mother, that actually takes responsibility over it. Which type of parent do we want to be? I think I know the answer, but let's strengthen ourselves with seeing it through a mahalach that he builds over here, which is very, very fascinating. Ha'im ha'yeled tamid chash et ahavat horav, ra'andaf chaf hei. It's two sides, chaf hei. Tofa'a yedu'am b'tzuyahi, we have a very known phenomena that takes place. She'orim rabim margishim belibam ahava rabba klapei yeldehem. The parents feel so much love in their heart for their children. Ulam ha'yeladim enam margishim she'ahorim achen ohavim otam. And still, the children don't feel that parents love them. Parents are loving. They are loving their kids. The child does not sense that. That's not their experience. It's two different experiences taking place. אכן בדרך כלל תופעה זו אינה באה לידי ביטוי בגיל הרך. Toddlers, it's not so much their parsha. That's not what they're thinking or feeling. I don't know, at what age does your kid say for the first time, you hate me? When does that start? No one ever heard it in this room. What's that? No, 5? I think 5, yeah, probably 5-ish, right? 5, 6.
Younger than me.
Right, we're all thinking, yeah, like 13th, no. A shtickle younger than that. So he says, let's be real, אכן בדרך כלל תופעה זו אינה באה לידי ביטוי בגיל הרך. It doesn't happen when they're really, really young, אולם, ככל שהילדים מתבגרים, ישנם ילדים שאף יהיו מוכנים להודות בפני בעל מקצוע שהוריהם אינם אוהבים אותם. You know what that means? Put the kid in the shrink's couch, and they're willing to admit that they feel their parents don't love them. כמובן שלא תמיד הם צודקים. They're not always right. אולם לטענתם, כך הם מרגישים. But that's what they feel. A kid says such a statement. A parent knows that that's not the truth. It's so hard to hold space that is the child's experience, because it's the most threatening thing to that which we hold to be most dear and most precious to us. So when we hear a staggering statement like that, our initial response is to go into defense mode, protective mode, and that's never helpful. That doesn't do anything, you know. Of course you could say, no, I love you. And if you say the word, that's not true, that's already a problem. Because what are you saying not true about? Their feelings or the statement? Usually they interpret it to say, you're saying that about the way they feel. What do you mean? This is how I feel. Now he says they're not always right. Could be they say that sometimes because they're trying to prove a point or get whatever it is. But what they're really saying is a statement about how they currently feel right now. And you're going to say, no, slicha, that's not true. Chas v'chalila. So that's a very, I'm not in this shiur, but in other shiurim from other people, the validation of children's feelings versus the reality that may be taking place by you can be two opposing worlds that when not dealt with properly, that friction can cause massive, massive short-term damage and long-term damage. So we're not going to get too much into that because we're not speaking right now about the child's feelings. We're speaking more about how are we as parents dealing with hearing such statements which in the emet of it being a reality are not true. You know that that's not true. But how do I balance the fact that that is actually what they are feeling? You hate me. You hate me. You don't love me. What are you talking about? You hate me. I'm so sorry you feel like that. Imagine a kid says to a parent, you hate me. And then you say, oh man, yeah, I'm so sorry that that's what's happening. Or I'm so sorry that that's what's going on right now. Kid's sitting there saying, you're saying that I'm right? No. I'm saying that that's what you're feeling. But we'll together figure out a way for you to realize that even though that's what you're feeling, that may not be true. May not be true. So giving space for the child to feel the need to express that in a Chassidic way. Obviously, there's ways even through that in chinuch to give space to a child. We're not in the world of total hefker. Modern psychology has taken it to a place that the most healthiest thing for a child is that en shum gvulot, that you have to be completely in the name of free speech. It starts at the age of 5, and you have to give them the autonomy and the ability and the access to say whatever they want to say in the name of being authentic and being real. That's not a Yiddish concept. That's not a Jewish concept, and we see how far that's taken the world to such an extreme. All in the name of empowerment comes through free speech and the ability to really say what's in your mind. Can you imagine if we walked around actually telling people what we think about them? Like what certain emotions, what certain visuals make us think, chas v'chalila. So how do we do this? So he says like this in the third paragraph, כמובן שכאשר הורים, כאשר רוצים להתמודד עם אותה הרגשה, that when a family wants to, when you want to deal with that feeling, ראשית צריך לבחון מהו מקורה, where is it coming from? What's the source of a statement of a child that says, you hate me? Where is it coming from? Where is it rooted? ורק לאחר מכן נוכל לבדוק כיצד לתקן אותה, but only afterwards we could figure out how to fix it. What's interesting here is that he's describing how men usually, how husbands usually respond to wives as opposed to wives to husbands, because the initial response of a man is, I need to fix this now. That's what happens to parents. That's the triggering that happens by parents when they hear from a child such a statement. And here, the Shekhinah needs to be even more in the front, and the Shekhinah needs to hold space for, let's figure out what the source, where is this really coming from, and only then can something like this be repaired. Only then something like this be repaired. So far, you're with me? Yeah? נקודת ההנחה הראשונה היא שעצם ההרגשה אינה נכונה. We start off by saying that what they're feeling, the הרגשה is not right. It's not true. שהרי כאמור, because that's we're under the assumption, לא קיימת מציאות שהורים אינם אוהבים את ילדיהם. There's no reality. There's no such a thing that parents don't love their children. That's what we say. That's what we tell ourselves. There's no such a reality. There's no such a scenario that this could be valid. This could be true. En davar kazeh. En davar kazeh. That's what happens inside to us. Like that's how we're usually operating from that place of all day long. If there's a silent soundtrack and it had words, it would say basically that what we're projecting to our children all day long is, don't you know I love you? Don't you know I love you? I'm doing this because I love you. I'm punishing because I love you. I'm doing this because I love you. Everything is because I love you. That's what we're under the assumption of. This is true at every age. Parents that their kids are already out of the house and they're already children, they already have their own children, and then the mother knows, the grandmother knows, it's not my place anymore for chinuch, that ended, or some never get to that realization that, parents, you don't have to mechanech, or you shouldn't mechanech your children once something shifts in life, that they start their own home. You can give an eitzah in a nice and sweet way, a loving way, but they're under the assumption, grandparents are already under the assumption, at whatever age, is that when they make comments to their children about how they are as a spouse or as a parent to a child, I'm just saying this because I love you. I'm just saying this because of my experience and my nisayon. Again, I feel like I'm the only one that either you're being very tznuot in your, I can't tell right now, so I'm like, do you know what I'm talking about? That's my, yeah, okay. No, because it's important, you have to realize, in these types of shir, when no one is like, it's not for me. You understand? It's not, maybe a shtickle, but not really for me. It's that in the room, people deal with these types of things all the time. But sometimes they're under the impression that we're probably the only ones that go through such things. So it's important that when things like this are realities in our lives, that people don't think that they're the only meshuganas. Like Hanan Ben-Ari's great new song, Ani lo ha-mishuga yichidi. I'm not the only Mishugana that's in the room, right? Yes.
It's all fixable. And I'm coming from both ends.
Mm-hmm.
It's all fixable. That's like, so everybody can like breathe.
As a bubby, you're saying this.
Bubby, baby, and
Sister, everything, yes. B'ezrat Hashem. So again, נקודת ההנחה הראשונה, our first assumption is, שעצם ההרגשה אינה נכונה, it's not true, we don't hate you, and you know that. שהרי כאמור, because it's impossible, there's no such a metzius, there's no such a reality, that parents don't really love their children, which is true in the core, but that's not what's being interpreted in the home. That's not what's being given over in the relationship. That's not being expressed. It could be a truth that you have that's not being expressed. Biram, ידוע הדבר, we know, שבכל שקר, in every lie, חבוי ניצוץ מסוים של אמת. There's a phrase for this in English. How do you say this? What's the phrase?
Jokes.
What's that?
Jokes.
Absolutely, yeah. They say that about jokes. Here he's saying, well, what's the, in every,
there's an element.
I guess there's an element, right. So here he's saying also in every sheker, like for a parent, that's a joke. The kid says, you hate me. What are you talking about? In every joke, there's a shtickle truth. So too with every type of sheker, there's a spark of truth. And in Chassidus, they would say, why is it there? To be redeemed. To learn from it, to pull it out. This is much, much, much larger concept, but in a nutshell, there's something that's called Shviras HaKelim, Shvirat HaKelim. And all the truths in the world got dispersed all over tohu, all over chaos. And our job in this world is to travel this world and not just say, I'm with emet. Whatever is totally emet to me, that's what I'm sticking to. But it's to also realize that when you're placed in front of something that's a sheker, that there's an avoda for there to you. This is how the Rebbe sent shluchim to the world. It's also what he told Bibi when he was going into the UN. You're walking into a room that's completely sheker and dark. So he would say, he should have said, therefore you shouldn't walk into that room. But we don't hold like that. We hold that, no, there are certain rooms, if you're on the level, to walk into, to redeem sparks, to pull out sparks of truth. For a parent to come to the place of understanding that in statements that are not true by children are hidden sparks of truth, Ashrei hayeladim ha'elu, praiseworthy are parents like that are willing to go to that place. But lucky children that have parents, that have the ability to not have the knee-jerk reaction of, it's not true, but rather say, let's sit with this. This is an opportunity. This is an opportunity to discover something. It's very hard and so worthwhile. So again, ברם ידוע הדבר שבכל שקר חבוי ניצוץ מסוים של אמת ועלינו לזהות היכן הוא וכיצד מטפלים בו. We have to identify it and figure out how to deal with this. But he has like a disclaimer here. אומנם, מסגרת זו אינה עוסקת בפתרון בעיות. This sefer, we are not problem solving. We're not explaining here, this is how you actually solve these problems. What we're doing is addressing the nefesh and saying awareness and consciousness must come before anything, and only from there you could start to build. אומנם מסגרת זו אינה עוסקת בפתרון בעיות, אולם הצגנו כאן דוגמה של בעיה נפוצה. But what we did here was we presented an example of a problem that's very much apparent and found quite often. בכדי להבין כיצד עלינו לבנות את החינוך מלכתחילה. This is all in order to explain to us how to build this chinuch job that we have. We have the love job and we have the chinuch job, which we spoke about last month. We have the love, which is apparent, that's the basis, and then the chinuch, it can only be built over that love. באופן שימנעו בעיות מסוג זה. This is what this sefer is trying to help us do. Seder hadvarim, the order of things, where things are placed. So just to refresh in our memory, the first layer in the world of relationships between parents and children is that which you taste already the moment the child is born obviously the mommy tastes this way before the child is born, actually born into the world. It's the moment they sense that connection. Whether they actually feel a kick or they already sense that this new entity is being formed in their body, and that thus begins now this love. They can't explain it. You didn't do anything to earn it. It's just there. Mutba beteva habriya, embedded within the framework of nature. That doesn't stop once the baby's born. It grows. And then when they actually express an emotion, it starts to tamper with that which we knew to be an absolute truth. So he described, we spoke about that. Above and upon that comes the framework of, I'm not just here to just feel the love, I'm here to mechanech. I'm here to educate. I'm here to also, Hashem trusted these neshamas and put them in my, I don't want to say possession. I think a better word is, I don't know if jurisdiction works, but in my, actually domain is not really. Care, what's that?
In your care.
Care, yeah, in my care, in order to also perform a something that's called chinuch, that's called lechanech. That's the Seder HaDvarim. We're not going here into problem solving. We're just trying to form a framework upon which we can make sure to avoid as many problems as possible. Kfi shetzuyan ve'udgash rabot, second to bottom paragraph. I already apologize, I have to leave a few minutes early today. Kfi shetzuyan ve'udgash rabot, as has already been expressed a lot and will be expressed frequently. Kol hore ohev et yiladav ve'doeg lekol tzorchehem. Every parent loves their children and is trying to do their best to fill all the needs a child has. שהרי המציאות מראה שכל הורה משקיע בדרך כלל את מירב החיים כפשוטו עבור ילדיו. Reality will come and show us that once, from the moment you become a parent, most of your real kochot in the world are invested in making sure that your children have everything that you need. I was watching an interview with one of the survivors of Be'eri, someone that lost a wife and a child, and I think he also lost a leg. And he was speaking about the tovanot 2 years later. What's the tovanot? What kind of, how do you say tovana?
Takeaways?
Yeah.
Yeah, but it comes from the word bina, obviously, tovana. It comes from like a takeaway, but from coming from an inner place of intelligence and of looking at life and experiencing life. Yeah, and understanding. Insight. Insight's better, I think, yeah. So he was saying, first speaking about obviously what he felt about his neighbors in Gaza, his hitpakchut, his waking up. This guy was like carrying the degel of the small, you know. This guy was one of the ones that would help transport them to get medical help, and you know, all the classic story of what happened over there. And if we don't wake up, what's going to happen more and more all over the country, especially in our backyard over here. The same exact thing. Actually, no, it'll be much, much worse. So he woke up. He's one of the ones that woke up. But then he said, they asked him, okay, but what, azov et kol zeh, but what about like kilu, just life? Like, imagine that wasn't the issue, alavai. He said, I started thinking, at the end of someone's life, he said he's never heard someone say, man, I should have put more hours in work. No one ever says, I should have put more hours in the office. Everyone, if they do have some feeling of regret in terms of their life investment, they always say, I should have spent more hours at home. No one's ever said, I should have put more hours in the office. And even if they would have spent more hours in the office and they would have made more money thinking that that's what would satiate the family, everyone with that place of deep insight knows that that's never a person's real emet when they're about to go to olam ha'emet. He's saying, when you think about it, most of the kochot that most of us really put into life is making sure that we're taking care of our children's needs. Even if we do spend a lot of time in the office, in our minds, what we're thinking of is that when my child is cold next winter and they need new boots or a new winter coat, I don't want my wife to even have to think about this for a second in terms of can we have it or not. Everything should be provided for my children. The greatest gaiva, holy gaiva, the greatest pride a parent can have in this world is that they feel that they're taking care of their child. There's no greater pride. There's no greater sense of pride, holy pride in this world. And he's saying, we actually invest most of that time. Third line, "Ve'ilulei hayta lo ahava leiladav," if he didn't have if a parent didn't have love for their children, הרי שהוא לא היה משקיע זמן, כוח ומשאבים רבים עבורם. They wouldn't put in what they put in. אם כן, כיצד ניתן להבין תופעה כזו? If that's the truth, and most of us know that that's really the way we live our lives, אם כן, כיצד ניתן להבין תופעה כזו? How could we speak about the phenomena that he mentioned in the beginning of this shir, שלאחר כל ההשקעה המרובה, after everything we've put in, ישנו ילד שסבור כי הוריו אינם אוהבים אותו? You could have a mitzvah that a child can come to the assumption that the parents don't love them? Again, going back to a defense mechanism response to that, a parent could say, who put that shirt on your back? Who put the food in the fridge? You say, I don't love you? Right? Now, did you hear? I'm not saying any of you have ever said that. Kayam, it exists. That people will actually say, what are you talking about? Look, I'm providing everything for you. The kid is silently responding. They don't have the words for this. But what they're really saying is, you call that love? That's an obligation. That's an obligation that you have. That's not love. That's a chiyuv. And then you hear those words, and if a child would actually be able to express that, and a parent would be bold enough to hear and listen to those words, that's the wake-up call of all wake-up calls. The differentiation between an obligation and expression of love. Now the truth is, you could do the same exact thing in terms of providing while expressing the love. It doesn't mean you have to do more things necessarily. Each case to its own. It's just a matter of when you're doing that which you're going to do anyway, don't confuse an obligation that you have with another obligation. And that the second obligation we're speaking about, which is the next piece, is how much time do you spend expressing that which you think they already know? Verbally, physically, like all these things. The question he's leaving us here with, how could it be that a kid can come to such a realization? We more or less answered it already, but let's see how he develops it. הסבר חלקי לתופעה כזו, in a way that we could partially explain this phenomena, נעוץ בדברינו הנ"ל לעיל. It's already embedded in what we spoke about last week. אילו האהבה של ההורים לילדיהם הייתה אהבה מושלמת, which we already said last week is impossible. If parents' love for their children could be a complete unit, הרי שהילדים היו מרגישים זאת באופן טבעי ללא שום עמל ויגיעה. The child would feel it naturally. You wouldn't have to do much. אולם מכיוון שאף אדם לא נברא שלם, but since no person was born complete, וגם, despite what you may think, גם ילדינו אינם שלמים, our children aren't perfect either, הרי שאף שהאהבה קיימת, אולם מכיוון שאינה שלמה, אכן בעומק הנשמה האהבה היא שלמה, אבל ילד מרגיש שאינה שלמה, even though love exists. But since he's saying, despite the fact that in the depth of the soul, of course, our love for our children is shalem, but the child isn't feeling that it's shalem. לכן תיתכן תופעה של ילדים הסבורים, כי האהבה של הוריהם אינם קיימת כלל. By a child, you either love me or you don't love me. Like by a child, it's either you either completely love me and you know exactly how to love me, or you hate me. There's no in between. That's what he's saying over here. Think about that for a second. In the mind of a child, there is no like a little bit. It's all or nothing to them. Yes.
This whole time I've just been thinking about how this compares to our relationship with Hashem and how we feel about Hashem and how we think Hashem feels about us. And
this is not musar at all, I'm about to say. It's just to mechazek what you're saying, is that's exactly what we spoke about the first 2 minutes of shir. It's exactly what we said, like mamish those words. And it's so important and it's good you're bringing it up, right? I'm triggered from like when a Rebbe would do that to me in high school if I can. So that's why I don't want it, Chalila, I want to strengthen what we started with. You have to always keep it like that in that framework. Tamid. Nachon meod. So, he says it could be that children are under the assumption their parents don't love them at all. Why? Because they only love them 99%. Or they only love them 95%. Or they're only able to express that love on 90%. To the child, and really, in the world of emet, like we said, 99% truth is 100% sheker. You've heard that line before? If you're holding by truth to be 99% true, that means that it's really in the sum total of things, there's a possibility to live a life of 100% sheker. Vezot mikevan, where does this come from, this phenomenon to think that parents don't really love their children? Bless you, shehem mezahim et nekudat hatorpa shebahem haoreg doeg לעצמו ושם הם מוצאים את חוסר האהבה כלפיהם. Okay.
What's torpa?
Well,
Weak point.
yeah, a weak point. I was going to say,
Weak point.
like the weak point. God bless you.
Sente.
What it means is like this. And this is our door. It's more, this becomes harder than any other door. If a child looks at their parent involved in something that is fulfilling their own need while they think that it's on the cheshbon of their child, that's an opening to harp on that and then create a picture of you don't love me. Why am I saying that in this door this is more difficult and more sensitive than any other door, that a child could be exposed to a moment that they think their parent is doing something on their own cheshbon as opposed to their cheshbon? Why it's much more common?
Can you give an example?
Yes. This. 100%. 1,000,000%. It's because of our pocket computers. 1,000,000%. Because you understand, for a parent to be, let's say, distracted in a visible way to a child up until our era, so what would the need for, like, how would they engage in such a thing? So it would be something that would take more ma'amatz than just pull out something out of the pocket, or just it's a mamash kacha. So the child sees at that moment. Now you're thinking, what do you mean I love you? I'm just taking a break for a second. You could even be, unless you tell your child, right now I'm texting your teacher, or I'm looking at the 80th WhatsApp group that I've been added to from Vad Horim or something. In the child's mind, what is the mommy or abba doing?
Something more interesting.
Something more interesting than them?
Disconnecting.
Yes. Now, why is it something more interesting? How do they know that it exists? Because they themselves are like this too. So they're saying, the way that you're using this thing is the way that I'm using this thing. When I'm in this thing, what am I basically telling the world? Azvuti, this is more important to me. That must mean that when Ima or Abba, or mom and dad are also doing this thing, that's the same thing that's happening. So he says like this, that's a nekudat torpa, that's a weak spot, right? The child sees that and begins to build migdalim. They start to build towers, imaginary towers, upon that. Are we saying over here that a parent shouldn't have a moment that they could do whatever they feel like doing in a Bezrat Hashem, a holy and kosher way on their phone? We're not saying that, but we're just describing over here that when the building of love and chinuch isn't built in a healthy and proper way, it opens the gates for children and their imagination to start building these buildings of, you don't really love me, which will lead to, no, it starts with like this, at this moment something was more important. That means that, let's start with the building. At this moment, I'm seeing you, there's something more important than me and my needs right now, which thus means I'm less important, which means you don't really love me, which means you don't love me, which means you hate me. Where did it come from? Not always, but he's giving an example. Where did it stem from? What's the point of this sefer? Lezahot bashoresh, to identify in the root of things how things begin. Now this is not true always, Avi. I'm going to keep on repeating it. There's no like chad v'chalak, clear, complete answers and explanations to every single issue a child has gone through. But he's saying, and it's not even, maybe this isn't the greatest example of being distracted by the pocket computer. I don't know. There could be other examples as well. Maybe it's the way that my parents act when there's friends over. And I see them, wow, they're so makpid on the house being clean, mannerisms and all these things, and my mommy laughs so much more when her friend comes over. When it's just us, she barely laughs. And then something starts. This is what may begin to transpire and take place in a child's brain. You're completely unaware of what they saw. You're completely unaware of what they've been exposed to. And you're also completely unaware as a parent, how could you know what's beginning to transpire inside of them? You don't know. Bentayim, what happened in the meantime. There's a whole masechta. They wrote a whole masechet. And they have Rashi and Tosfos on it. And they have Rishonim and Achronim. And in their mind, this is like the emet of all emet. It's a heavy load. And it comes from mitziat nekudat topa. Finding those moments where maybe we seem to our children as uncaring and not involved and not interested. You hate me starts with you're not really interested in what I have to say. That's where it stems from. That's the shoresh of what's going on over here. However, to go back to the beginning of this whole series, if the mashpech, if the funnel is intact, if the funnel of love doesn't have leaks, and upon that funnel, there's a world of chinuch that's being transmitted there that while you're mechaneching, the child is not losing the sense that there's a mabul of love coming through the chinuch, then when the child sees a nekudat torpa by their parents, there's much less of a sikui, of a possibility, that the binyan of interpretations could be built. That's what he's saying to us. Is this coming across? That's what he's saying to us. He's not saying those moments of you being distracted won't happen, or he's not saying that the breathers you need won't happen. They'll always happen. But it doesn't lead the children to start interpreting it in the way that they are when the mashpech, when the funnel of real, pure, emesdika, holy love, and chinuch at the same time are being transmitted because there are no holes. The bridge is intact. It's flowing through. That's why we spent the first 2-3 months just on the funnel, for it to be proper, for it to be healthy, for it to be to check into it all the time, to see if there are leaks, to be aware of it. When it's like that, when it's flowing like that, what happens is the child won't jump to a conclusion so fast. There are many, many examples I can give right now. Is anything coming to your mind of an example that could be where a child can misinterpret something that be'emet is like, in a minute they could start to go off in their own world of machshavas? Yeah.
So my son's friend has recently moved out of his mother's house. They divorced because she's toxic. And it's hard to know what toxic looks like these days. There's abusive, there's berating, there's lots of things that are unhealthy. I sat with him, I'm like, this guy just asked what toxic means. Like, I'm strict about your curfew. Is that toxic? You know, like, it's so easy to sort of like not interpret what each other's mean, like what the other person's saying. I remind him, like, make sure you know that I'm not toxic. Like, let's take for like it's very simple, but like,
yeah. That's a great example. Now, it could be that the things that we're under the assumption are actually, they get it. They know why I'm telling them this. It's working. They see it by someone else. They start to go into their own minds, like, well, you know what? Maybe. But it's so, honestly, it's an amazing thing that, the last generation would never act like the way you just shared. Never. Why? Because it's not on you. It's on the kid has to come to the realization. It's on the kid to realize that the parents are not toxic in this. That's what the whole generations were like this. Did I ever tell you that there was a shaila that the Rebbes would ask? They say, how could it be we have a masechta, we have a tractate in the Torah for kimat everything? We have Masechet Rosh Hashanah, we have for almost every holiday, right? We have Masechet Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Masechet Sukkah. We have Masechta Megillah on Purim. We have Masechta Psachim, right? Shavuos basically is the whole Torah, that's when it's Torah Sheba'al Peh. What's the only Masechta Yant Chagla but there's no Masechta for? Chanukah. How much Torah Sheba'al Peh is there on Chanukah? There's 2.5 pages in the middle of Masechet Shabbos on Chanukah. Tell me something, Chanukah doesn't have dinim? Chanukah has plenty of dinim. You ever open the Shulchan Aruch on Chanukah? Kitzur Shulchan Aruch on Chanukah? There's plenty of them. What does the Gemara do say? When it talks about Chanukah, it speaks about the difference between the Shmanim and the Ptilas that can be used on Shabbos as opposed to Chanukah. That's a whole sugya. And the Gemara begins there. It says, Tanu Rabbanon Mai Chanukah. And it says, Tanu Rabbanon Mitzvahs Ner Chanukah Ishu Beisa. Chanukah is really all about a person and their home. It's the world of chinuch, Chanukah, chinuch. The question was, how come there's no Masechet called Masechet Chinuch? How could it be? The Torah covers everything. How could it be there's no Masechet called Masechet Yeladim?
What's Horiot?
No, that's not
But it's the word, it's the same.
Horai.
What is it?
No, but it's not. That's bichlal not that.
Oh,
Yeah.
weird.
Yeah, but it's not. That's
Someone who doesn't know anything about it, you hear the word.
yeah. No. The Masechet Horayos is not about
okay.
that. It could be. I can understand. You could be under the assumption it's talking about parenting.
Mm-hmm.
You could say that about any Masechta, really, but no, it's not. So the answer was that Tzaddikim say is that this Masechet called Yeladim is the Gilui of Mashiach. Only Mashiach is going to be the one to come and teach it to us, as we know that it says in Malachi. It's the Haftarah of Shabbos Agadol, V'heishiv lev avot al banim ve'lev banim al avotam. Parents and children, their hearts will reunite, find themselves, it'll be one. When does that, when that takes place, what is that a sign of? Mashiach, Geula. Therefore, when we're learning such complex issues and topics, and we would love to see, well, what do the Rabbanim say? Like, what do the Mefarshim say? You could snatch out drashas and vorts and maybe like davar mitoch davar. But it's the last battle before, we think it's the Ishmaelim, it's not. The real last battle before Mashiach comes is the Orlas Halev, it's the foreskin of the heart that needs to be removed and gutsy enough to realize that before Mashiach comes, we have to show ourselves by living and showing the Ribono Shel Olam that we don't go into defense mechanism mode when our child, which is the piece of you that you trust with us, is trying to express itself. This is a shlav of the Geula. That's why these things are so intense and so sensitive. So if you find yourself being like, wow, this is really complex, like, yeah, it is. It is. That's just a siman of how important it is to spend so much time in lashkia in this type of avoda. I have to stop here. What we're going to be doing next week is that we're going to be, as you see, the topic of the next segment is Chashivut bituy miluli shel ahava. Do you know how many people I know are mamish in a state of galus in their own homes, with their families, with their children? Why? They are unable to express bituy miluli. They are unable to verbally express that which is chai v'kayam in their emet, which is love. They just can't do it. I saw this, the first time I saw this, left a strong impression with me. This was about, I would say like, it was the summer of 2005 or 6. So mamish 20 years ago, and I remember it happening, no, more. This is like 2003, 2004, it's longer. But it just shows you how such an imagery has, I grew up in a home I would ask my father to pass the challah, he'd start crying. It's like, I'm not an example. I grew up in a very, my mother would always tell us how proud she, a lot of bituy miluli. There was a lot of verbal expression. And chinuch, we got, we had the norm, I think. The best that they could possibly do. And for some reason, I thought that most people are like this. Like that was the same expression. If I'd go away for a trip, the birkas kohanim I'd get, the birkas abanim my father would give me, and the tears, whatever. I had a band. At that point, I had a band, and we started touring. We would travel different places, and in Australia. In Australia, I traveled alone, but it was already like a lot of traveling, and Europe and America, and a few times I could take the whole chavra with me. So we met at the airport. My family was still living in Los Angeles. I got there alone. And another buddy of mine, we were still single, the bandmates, most of us. So his father dropped him off, and it was the first time his son was going on a trip to Chul. And this person was already in their mid-20s. And I know the father loves his son. And the kid knows it too. But then when it was time to say Tzeitzchem L'Sholom, and they parked and they went out of the car, and the father took out the mizvada, the suitcase for the son, and I'm standing there, and the son was like, okay, and the father was like, Hatzlacha Rabba, right? And he gave him a handshake. And I knew that's the father. The father couldn't do more than that. The kid knew that also. And it was the first time the kid is going out. Wants to feel like, I'm a successful musician. Look at me, look where I reached. I'm going out to the world, It was the most the father could have done. And the pele is that this son has become such a beautiful, loving Abba himself. Now, years later, he has his own children, built his own home. It's an amazing, don't try to figure out who it is. None of you know who he is. I see some of your heads. It's no one that the Chevra here knows. It's not the one that's in my life so much now. It was very close in my heart, but it's not one of the Chevra that shows up here sometimes. I never forget that moment of when the father's handshake, to me, I see it. It was a 3-second thing that happened 22 years ago, 23 years. I remember it like it happened right now. Because of the hashpah it had on me, like, that actually exists. And the inyan is to remember that people like that sometimes would do anything to figure out a way to never do that and to go like that. They would do anything. They would do anything in the world. So in their generation, and the generation that those kids grew up in, they would do anything in the world, but they never think it's possible to talk or learn about these things, especially in a Torah framework. I'm so optimistic about the state of the world because Chasdei Hashem, we are living and raising our children in an era where these things that are most crucial to speak about and learn about and talk about is available and is, Baruch Hashem, being spoken about more and more and more. Now, it's not always, people don't always get it right. I pray that we're always trying to mechaven to places of just be'emet la'amito, but at least we're giving it a really good shot. A really good shot. Bezrat Hashem will continue this next week. It should be a week full of good news for Am Yisrael.
Amen.